This is the Wednesday, December 3rd meeting of the Planning and Zoning Committee. We'll go ahead and get started. First, we have public comment. We did have one individual sign up ahead of time, Ms. Kay Bowers, speaking on BL 2025-1005 in support. Ms. Bowers, are you here? Ms. Bowers, are you in the room with us here? Sure. We never have anyone give comment. Okay. Ms. Bowers, we're at public comment. You are the only individual to sign up if you'd like to speak to the committee now. Okay. Ms. Bowers, you're recognized.
Thank you. Apologies for not being in the right place at the right time. Oh, I'm Kay Bowers, and I spent my career as an affordable housing developer and provider. I'm part of NOAA's Housing Task Force and on the board of the Alliance for Affordable Nashville. I'm here to express my strong support for this legislation in front of you, and also to share with you why I believe it deserves your support as well. And this is not my strong suite. I believe that these zoning types are a necessary step forward in addressing Nashville's pressing housing needs. This bill does not apply the new zones to any property. It simply creates the framework for future and thoughtful use. The updates actually give our neighborhoods protections that they don't have under current zoning. And it gives our city more flexible tools to allow for middle housing, and at the same time helps ensure that the housing architecturally does fit into our neighborhoods. While I understand the desire to amend the language to address some neighborhood concerns, I ask that you remember that we have about 700,000 residents who most of us want to be able to live affordably and to thrive in our county. They may not be able to take the time to come to speak today, to you tonight, but they are our neighbors, and it's them that I'm thinking about. I ask that you support this legislation and give careful thought to any amendments that apply an approach that would end up defeating the intention and purposes of the zoning options. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. Is anyone else in the gallery wishing to deliver public comment today? Yes, ma'am. You are recognized.
All right. I thank you so much, Chair, for recognizing me. I can get to my public comment. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Alicia Haddock, Executive Director of Neighbor to Neighbor, a 28-year-old organization that works in every corner of Davidson County, helping residents strengthen their neighborhoods, protect their homes, and shape the future of the communities they love. For years, our residents have watched Nashville become a place where they can no longer afford to live. Every neighborhood meeting, every workshop, every leadership academy echoes the same fear: will my family be forced out next? The zoning legislation before you is not a theoretical policy conversation for us. It is about survival for thousands of Nashville families. It is about whether seniors can age in place, whether essential workers can remain near their jobs, and whether the next generation can imagine a future here. We need more tools, not someday, but today. This legislation expands the pathways for neighborhoods to grow responsibly, prevent displacement, and maintain social fabric. It does not solve everything, but it moves us forward instead of leaving families waiting and worrying while the crisis worsens. In working across the city, we have seen how rising rents, limited supply, and speculative development erode the very sense of community that makes Nashville special. This set of bills offers residents something they have not had in a long time, a fighting chance to stay home. I also want to acknowledge the amendments before you. While amendments can strengthen legislation, they must not also distract us from the care and the purpose of these bills. So we are standing firm in support of the bills that you have before you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to deliver public comment today? You're recognized. Please go ahead.
Hi, all. I'm Claire Hennigan. I live in District 5. And I want to kind of echo what my colleague Alicia just said. I was a Belmont student. I came here in 2017 to attend school, and I, by all, did all I could to stay here in Nashville. And luckily found a landlord who is offering me affordable housing. Because of that, I live with 3 people. It's meant to be 4. Complicated story there with my basement that flooded. But I live with a lot of people. I know a lot of people on my street have the same kind of situation. And my landlord specifically, he has a dream for that property to create middle housing. To create more opportunity for the people on that street to stay on that street. It's this part of East Nashville that a lot of folks are just getting calls nonstop from housing developers. Please sell me your land. There's tall and skinnies pop up every time an elderly person dies because they lose their home. And it's really hard to keep the personality of our neighborhood, which I love. I love walking around and seeing people like my neighbor, may she rest in peace, Joan Kite, who I loved, who lived in middle housing. I loved walking around and seeing the parks that I live near, like Cleveland Park and McFerrin Park. I can walk to my council member's house and ask him for his shop vac when my basement floods. Which I've done many times. Thank you so much, Sean. And it is absolutely vital that we embrace new zoning options and embrace a city that needs its people to stay here because we are the people who make the city go and make the city run. So thank you, and thank you for your shop vac.
Thank you very much. Is anybody else in the gallery wishing to deliver public comment today? Seeing none, I will declare the public hearing closed, and we will move on to the consent agenda. I currently have each agenda item on consent apart from the 2 housing and infrastructure bills under consideration. That's item 11, BL 2025-1005, and item 12, BL 2025-1005. Before I read the captions, does any other item need to be removed? Item 4. RS 2025-1680 will be removed from consent. Does any other item need to be removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll proceed to read the captions for the items on the consent agenda. Item 1, RS 2025-1664, sponsors Toombs, Horton, and Gadd, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government and Housing Agency to negotiate and enter into a pilot agreement and to accept payments in lieu of ad valorem taxes with respect to a multifamily housing project located at 865 West Trinity Lane, known as Trinity Lane Apartments. Item 2, RS 2025-1678, sponsors Kimbrough, Horton, and Evan Siegel, a resolution authorizing the Director of Public Property or his designee to exercise an option agreement for the purchase of a flood-prone property located at 3909 Tucker Road for Metro Water Services. Item 3, RS 2025-1679, sponsors Greg Toombs, Horton, and Evan Siegel, a resolution approving a notice of land use restrictions applicable to a portion of the campus of Alejandro Water Treatment Plant. Item 5, BL 2025-1108, sponsors Swara, Vo, Horton, Evan Siegel, Welsh, Hill, Allen, Ellis, Gamble, Ewing, Porterfield, Cap, Webb, Benedict, Gadd, and Toombs, an ordinance authorizing the renaming of South Street to King Hollins Avenue. Item 6, BL 2025-1136, sponsors Vo, Evan Siegel, and Horton, an ordinance authorizing the granting of a temporary construction easement to DeAngelis Diamond Construction LLC on a parcel or property owned by the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County. Item 7, BL 2025-1139, sponsors Coupin, Horton, and Evan Siegel, an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to abandon easement rights located at 1216 and 1220 Rosa L. Parks Boulevard, formerly a portion of alley number 213. Item 8, BL 2025-1140, sponsors Vo, Horton, and Evan Siegel, an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to abandon existing public sanitary sewer main and easements, to accept new public sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements for 3 properties located at 708B, 708C, and 712 14th Avenue South. Item 9, BL 2025-1141, sponsors Parker, Horton, and Evan Siegel, an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept new sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements for 6 properties located on Dickerson Pike, also known as Artist Lofts. Item 10, BL 2025-1142, sponsors Gadd, Horton, and Evan Siegel, an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to abandon existing public water main, fire hydrant assemblies, and easements, and to accept new public water main, fire hydrant assemblies, and easements for 2 properties located at 100 and 102B White Bridge Road, also known as TCAT Nashville. Those are each of the items on the consent agenda. Does any additional item need to be removed? Seeing none, do we have a motion? Moved and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Any not voting? The consent agenda is approved. I think we're at 11. Do you have 11? We're at 10. Consent agenda is approved. 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Moving on to items not on consent. The first item we have not on consent is item 4, RS 2025-1680, sponsors Johnston, a resolution requesting the Metropolitan Planning Department to create a countywide map that identifies areas that are appropriate for the new residential zoning districts proposed by BL 2025-1005, including RN1, RN2, RL1, RL2, and RL3, consistent with the adopted Nashville Next Community Character Manual and Metropolitan Code of Laws. See, we're joined here today by the primary sponsor, and I will go to you, Councilmember Johnson, if you give me just a moment. Councilmember Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you. Can someone from the committee move it, please? Thank you. So this resolution came from a conversation that I had with the director and with Lisa Milligan when we were talking about these different zoning districts and the public angst around it and the confusion and the negative response just in general. And they mentioned that they were working or planning to create a map to show where these zoning districts would be appropriate. And so this, which I think is fine and great, because when I was talking with Greg Claxton, I thought, you know, it would be helpful in these bills, especially with 1005, to have more guidance and guardrails. I think that would help with clearing up a lot of the confusion and a lot of the angst that we're hearing from constituents. And so this resolution just asked them to start that process now to create the map, to show, to give guidance to the Planning Commission. It doesn't mean that if an RN or any of these zoning districts were applied for outside of the map where it shows appropriate, that couldn't be moved forward by the council member. but it does give them guidance based off of Nashville Next and the different maps and policies and plans that we've put together over the course of multiple years with lots of constituent engagement, as well as infrastructure and all of that. And so it's that's all it is a little bit of guidance.
Thank you for that explanation. I saw Councilmember Parker also had his hand up. Councilmember Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just hoping to hear from the department that's being asked to do this, what their position is on it and how they would handle this if this passed. Would it be very different from how y'all are planning to proceed if this resolution did not occur?
Thank you. I'll go to the planning table. You're recognized.
Sure. Thank you. Certainly. So with the creation, if these new districts are adopted, then the next necessary step for the department would be to update the community character manual to actually incorporate those districts into the guidance that is within the community character manual. And we talk about that, and just for those listening at home, to make sure that everyone sort of is aware what that document is, that's our policy guidance document, which outlines all of the different land use policies that cover our county, such as urban neighborhood center, for example. And the community character manual outlines which zoning districts are appropriate within each of those policy areas, but also gets more specific in where in policy areas certain districts may be appropriate. They recognized that not every part within a specific policy area is homogeneous, and so not all areas of an urban neighborhood center would be treated the same. And so the community character manual, through text and diagrams, sort of gives that guidance. It is not so much a map update as it is a document update. I think that if you have perused the amendments, Councilmember Allen has an amendment that would delay the effective date of the RN and the RL to allow us to do that work of updating the community character manual. And we are supportive of that to allow for time to do that work. And so it would be slightly different in that it's not a mapping exercise, but it's an exercise in updating the actual manual.
Thank you for that explanation. Councilmember Parker?
Thank you. So to clarify, the work that y'all were planning to do with the CCM, you think would satisfy what's being requested in this resolution here?
It would not be a map that pinpoints areas and says this area off of Jones Avenue is appropriate for RN and RL. It is not that precise, and there's reasons for that. If we were to produce a map like that, that tried to translate all of the community character manual policies and zonings into a parcel level map, it could be viewed by the community as being a zoning proposal. And so the community character manual, along with the mapped land use policies, are used together when evaluating zoning requests and zoning changes. And so, and along with infrastructure availability, context, all of those things are sort of taken together. And so the map there wouldn't be a map that precisely says this area for RN, RL, or any of the other 100+ districts that we have in the code. It's simply a combination of the map and the updated community character manual with precise language that would give us that guidance.
Thank you. I had a question myself on this. I mean, from planning's perspective, is there anything unique about these two new proposed zoning districts relative to other zoning districts that would recommend us creating a countywide map for these and not for others?
Not in our view, no. I think that, no, I'll just leave it at that. Not in our view, no.
Okay. Thank you. I saw Councilmember Gamble, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Planning Table, for the clarification on the process that was already intended once or if these new zoning districts are approved. And it sounds like this amendment is different from the work that you all would be doing and maybe wouldn't be conducive to the process as it relates to the policy manual and updating the policy manual and the mapping, so to speak, on the policy areas, the suburban, urban centers, those kind of policy areas. So I guess my concern is that this resolution would create another step that could or could not, or may not, let me say it that way, may or may not be conducive or helpful to explain or to subduing angst that the sponsors suggested or in the comments as to what this resolution do. It seems like that it wouldn't help solve that problem. And I guess if you could speak to how the updating the policy manual as opposed to creating a map to suggest where the new districts would apply, how that might impact confusion or how it might help, I guess, clear up confusion as it's been stated for this resolution. And I don't know if you can do that, but it seems to me that it wouldn't help. It wouldn't help.
Planning, if you'd like to answer, you're recognized.
I'm not sure that I can exactly answer your question. The way that we think about land use policy is it's sort of two things. There is a map now. Every property in the county is designated one of our land use policies. So all of those are countywide map, and those are everything from T6, which is our downtown and most intense area, all the way to open space, to T2 rural. All of the county is mapped. And so you have the mapping designations that exist now, and then you have coupled with that the community character manual. And so the community character manual is going to point to and give you more guidance on what those policies are that are mapped. And it's going to start really broadly and say, this list of zoning districts is appropriate. But then it's going to start narrowing it down as you read the policy, because not every area, for instance, of urban neighborhood center is the same, even across the county or within the same policy sort of contiguous area. They're not all the same. Not every property is the same. And so there is a map, and then there is the manual, and those two things work together to guide zoning decisions.
For clarification, the maps that exist are in the character manual. Is that correct?
Yes, they are, and then they're available on our online mapping tools as well. But they don't, what the map doesn't do is say, this area of, I keep using urban neighborhood center, is appropriate for RM15.
Right.
They say, this is an area of neighborhood center, and then you can look at it and see, oh, it's next to an area of mixed use corridor on one side, it's next to an area of neighborhood maintenance on another side. And if you read the manual, that sort of context is going to tell you what's appropriate.
So the maps actually just show where the land use of that zoning district is allowed.
It just shows the land use policy. So the map is just a map of land use policy across the county.
Right.
The map of the land use policy and the community character manual work together.
Yes.
They're two pieces that have to go together, but they are not parcel level specific on which zoning district is appropriate here.
They're based on transect.
Based on the transect, based on the land use policy, and an individualized assessment is done anytime a request for rezoning comes in.
Thank you for that clarification. And that seems to be a more wide, comprehensive view of all of the zoning districts with the land use policy. And this seems to just focus on two districts, and it's more specific as to parcels, which we don't have that for any other any other zoning district. And so I would not be in support of the legislation for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gamble. We'll go to Councilmember Johnston and then Benedict and then Druffel. Councilmember Johnston, you're recognized.
Thank you. I guess I'm just a little bit confused because when we had this conversation with myself and Lucy and Lisa, it was their idea. They were the ones that offered to create this map to show where it's appropriate. And really the only holdback was, well, we can't contemplate where something is appropriate if it doesn't already exist. So it needs to pass first for us to contemplate where in the county that it exists. And I think that that's nonsense, which is why I have this resolution saying, let's start contemplating that now. So to then come in front of the body and say, oh no, this isn't necessary, and we're already going to do this, then why, when you were on the phone with me, did you say, listen, we're going to be doing this map to show where it's appropriate? And I'm like, great, that sounds amazing. And it's like, go ahead and do it. Well, we can't do it because it doesn't exist yet, yada, yada. But now all of a sudden, you're already sort of doing it. It's not necessary. It's not going to solve anything. I don't understand the disconnect between our conversation that we had privately and now in this public forum.
Planning, if you'd like to respond, you're recognized.
Thank you. We have always intended to update the community character manual. And that's what that's what I'm talking about, is that we have always intended to update the community character manual. We couldn't update that community character manual, which is the guidance that is used for rezoning decisions. We could not update until and if new districts are created. And so we have said that that would be the thing that we do update.
So then what was the map that you said you guys were going to and could create in relatively quick order, like weeks is what was told to me?
I thought that we were talking about the community character manual, and I apologize if there was confusion, but we have always been talking about, or I have always been talking about, and I certainly won't speak for Director Kemp. I have always been talking about updating the community character manual, the document.
Thank you. Next in the queue, we had Councilmember Benedict and then Druffel, and then we'll go to Councilmember Parker. Councilmember Benedict, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate the sponsor trying to get to a level of detail that I think the public wants to understand. This is, as we just heard explained, very technical. And so trying to move forward in a way with trust from the public, I think it's really important to look at those technical aspects of this in order for us to, get down to what will these look like once they're implemented. Once an application comes through for a rezone to RN, what's that, that's going to go in front of the Planning Commission. It's going to have 3 readings at council. But the question is, is that going to happen? There's a big question mark right out there with the public right now. Is that going to happen next door to me? And so I understand the intent and desire to have this type of information. I think my concern is that, from rezonings in District 7 that, I look at with the planning, when somebody comes to me and says, I'd like to rezone to XYZ, and oftentimes I say, too bad, kick rocks, no thanks. But when there are times that I say, oh, let's look at that, and I get an opinion from the planning department, just in a pre-app, meeting kind of thing, I get told whether that rezone, potential application is going to fit with the community character. And so I can't I could proceed, but I don't like to proceed without understanding what that looks like. And so I need that guidance from the community character side of things. And so I really appreciate hearing, again, the technical aspects of kind of the order of operation, if we will. So, again, I appreciate where the sponsor's coming from with this. I think that it's out of order, if you will, for the process that we're trying to get to. And again, I understand that the public wants to feel like they can trust in us that this isn't going to just be implemented overnight, but there's nothing in this bill that would, in the bills referenced here, that would happen overnight. So, I do look forward to the day that we can look at, in the districts or in the county where these would be appropriate. But I think that we've got to, it sounds to me, get through the first steps first. So I won't be able to support this resolution. But I appreciate it being brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Benedict. Next, we'll go to Councilmember Druffel. You're recognized.
Yeah, probably more for clarification. From the housing infrastructure study, it indicated that our next step would be mapping based on infrastructure capacity, which I thought was going to move in this fall or immediately after this. So I guess I need some more clarification, maybe a timeline. It's sort of sound in the housing infrastructure study it would be starting in November, December, if I remember reading this correctly. What is this the next step in doing this? And then is there a time frame or a target date to get it done? Because if we approve these new zoning types, it's going to increase the potential density, which we know we need, but more appropriately, it should be in the right areas that supports that capacity. So I guess I want to make sure that the progress or our next steps are lined up as what I understood.
Planning, you're recognized.
Sure. So we are continuing work on the infrastructure study portion, and it is quickly being wrapped up. And that infrastructure portion is really a systems view of our infrastructure network as opposed to sort of a project level view. And so it'll be looking at our systems of infrastructure. And so that is quickly wrapping up. At one point, we had indicated that we may look at proposing mapping changes, but we are not. The planning department has not proposed any changes to the zoning map at this time.
So that step is not going to be used, or I mean, how are then you going to use the infrastructure capacity to determine any guidelines?
Well, the infrastructure study would be utilized for any rezoning or looking at any future planning for large projects we're also involved in the CIB, so it can be utilized there as well. So this study and the infrastructure piece of it, it's not a map or a guidepost to rezoning. It's a broader look at where we have capacity or where we're lacking of capacity or where we may need additional infrastructure to support the growth that we expect to happen, regardless of zone changes under our existing entitlements. So it's not really a sort of guide for rezoning, and we're not using it or looking at it that way. We're going to have infrastructure needs just based on our existing growth rates under our current entitlements.
So originally I heard that we would go along arterials or places where it maybe made the most sense in terms of multimodal. So you won't be using that as a guide then for sort of that intense zoning against arterials in those areas that might support those?
So I think that's two different questions. So anytime that we are reviewing a rezoning request, we would again look at the community character manual, we would look at the land use policy, we would also look at infrastructure capacity. And anytime that we're looking at additional intensity in regards to housing or mixed use or retail, commercial, we always take into consideration infrastructure capacity as well as access to corridors. And so that will continue to be part of our consideration.
So the area where it says within 0.8 of a mile, but arterials, you'll be on higher density, will that still be fluid within your system?
Let's try to limit conversation to the resolution specifically in front of us. I'll go next to Councilmember Parker, who had his hand up.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I'm okay with this if we understand this as sort of reinforcing the work that's already taking place. But, since the sponsor doesn't see it that way, I'm going to have difficulty supporting it here or tomorrow. And I would let folks know that there is a community character manual layer in the parcel viewer. So it's very accessible. You don't have to dig through a 500-page PDF to find a certain area's character map. So you can just go into the parcel viewer and look at the community character manual layer there.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. Councilmember Gadd, I saw you had your hand up as well. You're recognized.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to the sponsor of this resolution. I know it is trying to make sure we provide as much clarity as possible. I'm curious if, I think not seeing the distinction here that we may be able to provide that clarity that's going to be helpful in the work that's going on. I don't know that I can support it in this moment, but it might be something that the sponsor and the planning department can continue to have a conversation about, so they can be on the same page with what they want to kind of bring forward next. But I appreciate the effort there.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I missed the beginning of this discussion. I apologize. I had a question that I had to ask out in the hallway. But as I understand it, the countywide map is the community character map that exists right now. And y'all planning intends to spend a lot of time creating the narrative that then explains where it's appropriate for the new residential zoning districts to be applied. So, I mean, in my mind, I appreciate the intent of this. I agree that anything we can do to generate and increase trust in the public in this process is really important. And in my mind, what is going to happen with the community character manual is the map that's being requested here. And just kind of from a legal standpoint, since this is a resolution requesting, if planning's interpretation is that they're delivering a map that provides that information by way of the narrative that they intend to create, are they under any obligation to do something different if we pass this?
One moment. Council Darby, you're recognized.
It is a non-binding resolution, and if the planning department interprets it in such a way, then I think that would be their answer to the request.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I understand my colleagues' different responses here, but to me, I appreciate the intent of this, and I feel like there is an implementation of it that meets that need, as well as provides what the planning department has decided is important to provide the context, so that then ultimately, with the delayed implementation effective date of this, as I have in my amendment, that we can provide this information, and that will be important. So I'm going to support the resolution.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any further discussion on this resolution? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Will all committee members in favor of the resolution please say aye and raise your hands? 1, 2, 3, 4. I see 4, 5. Councilmember Hurrell, was your hand up? Okay. The 5 in favor. All against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Plus myself. Oh, and Gamble. 7 against. Any not voting? No, not voting. Motion approval is 5 in favor, 7 against, 0 not voting. Next item, not on consent, is item 11. This is BL 2025-1005, sponsors Gamble, Parker, and Benedict. This is an ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, a zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County relative to the creation of 2 new zoning districts called Residential Neighborhood, RN, and Residential Limited, RL, all of which is more particularly described herein. We're joined here by the primary sponsor of the bill, Councilmember Gamble. Councilmember Gamble, would you like to give a brief explanation of the bill?
I would like for the planning table, the bill makes clarifications to the zoning table for these new districts, but if the planning table could give a little bit more information, that'd be great.
Thank you. Planning, you're recognized.
Sure. So this, wait, which bill are we on? I'm so sorry.
We're on 1005.
1005, yes, okay. Yes, so the substitute ordinance is needed to get the ordinance in alignment with the Planning Commission recommendation. It also makes some housekeeping cleanups. We worked with the council office on some organization of the bill overall and how it is incorporated into the zoning code, but those are not substantive changes. They don't change the substance, just the organization. So this essentially will just get it into compliance with the Planning Commission recommendation.
Thank you. Councilmember Gamble, would you like to make a motion on the substitute?
Move for approval.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the substitute, which we have heard an explanation for? Seeing none, all in favor? All against? Any not voting? Recommend approval of the substitute. Wait. Okay. Substitute is recommended for approval, 12 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. We have a number of amendments to consider today. I'll take these in numerical order, recognizing the chief sponsor first on each one. First, we have amendment number 1 by sponsor Druffel. Councilmember Druffel, would you like to give a brief explanation of the amendment, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This just provides a little bit more transparency. We know that if you're RNRL, you have a certain amount of housing units per 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. This just provides transparency and clarity when you apply for your zoning change, so that it's clear to the community. And so I think it's a good way to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. Any discussion by the committee on this amendment? Councilmember Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you. I think kind of similarly to some comments we've had about other zoning districts, and are we applying standards to these new zoning districts that we don't apply? If we zone a property RM15, it allows up to 15 units per acre, but design constraints and preference of the property owner and builder could change that. We don't make folks come in and say, okay, RM20, but I'm gonna do 3. And then where does that live? Do we attach it to the deed? What? I'm not sure. Because then, if we're having to go back, the whole point of using base zonings to accomplish this is that we're not having to go through the SP review process. So we're adding another layer of basically going back and reviewing the zoning application to see. It's not even specific that it would have to be written in the application. It could be an oral declaration to the clerk as you hand it over to them. I don't know that this is necessary. I think that we can use these zoning districts where they're appropriate and, understand the outcomes. And whenever I talk with folks about potential, if it's not an SP, I always tell people it could be up to this. If somebody's requesting RM20, it's an acre site, I'm gonna tell them this could be 20 units. I don't tell them, well, the guy said he's gonna do 7. The guy said he's gonna do 11. No, you tell them that the entitlement they're seeking allows up to this. And if that's not appropriate, then just use a different entitlement or leave it as is. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
I'm not in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. So Councilmember Coopin had his hand up. Councilmember, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And Councilman Parker, I like the accent on the guy applying for the units. I share my colleagues' concerns with this. I appreciate this, the sponsor of this amendment bringing it forward, and I appreciate kind of what it's getting at. But I agree that the zoning itself is limiting an amount of units, so then to further declare how many units within the limited units you're doing seems redundant. At that point, that particular zoning district then maybe just doesn't apply, or if it does apply, then it would be used. So it seems like it's kind of a feedback loop. And then I share the concerns too of where does that get codified, and is that legally substantive? And as we know in the construction world, sometimes things do change. You might start a project planning for 2 and applying for it, and then things change and you want to do 4, and you get an affordable housing grant and you can do more. I would not be in support of this amendment. Again, I appreciate what it's trying to get at, but I think that's already addressed in the zoning itself.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Gamble, did I see your hand up? Thank you. You're recognized. Then we'll go to Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Chair, and I echo the comments that have been stated. I appreciate the sponsor for bringing this forward. I would like to hear from the planning table on the appropriateness of this, because as we've heard, the zoning districts already declare the maximum number built on the site based on the zoning district. But if you could just give any insight on how this might impact any applications or zonings going forward.
Thank you, Planning. Go ahead.
Sure. When considering this amendment, I think some of our concerns were that there's no clear mechanism for recording the intent or communicating it to property owners or neighbors or prospective buyers of a property, that there is a declaration. It also isn't clear whether that would be something that would prevent a property from being rezoned at some later time to a higher declaration within that same zoning district. Additionally, other zoning districts that use bulk standards, such as mixed-use districts and commercial districts, there is no density requirement that they have, and they are generally much more intense from a land use standpoint than these proposed districts.
Thank you for that explanation. Councilmember Allen also had her hand up. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for the planning table. When a property gets to the point where there is a planning staff analysis that it becomes public record that shows up in the agenda for the planning commission meeting, you typically say this piece of property is zoned this much now, and that allows for this many units, total based on the acreage. And the proposed zoning allows for X and Y. And in many cases, except for a regulatory SP, you are often able to say what that is. Is it possible with this zoning, because unlike mixed use, there are sort of a finite number of possibilities. Is it possible that in the analysis that you will say, the future zoning of this would allow this many units or that many units based on these, townhouse, maxplex or whatever? Or is it not even conjecturable?
I think it could be. There are factors that are in the proposed RN and RL districts in regards to widths or building maximum square footages. There's maximum number of units in certain building types. And so some of the districts are limited by the building types, and the building types are limited by the amount of units. And so you're already sort of going to be able to define the maximum, if you will.
And so I guess my question is, would the planning analysis include this, if this is rezoned to RN1, these types are possible, and under these types, this many units would be possible?
I think, if these are adopted, then we will certainly look at how we include that information in our staff reports. I think that some of those numbers, I will say, are sort of just mathematical calculations that aren't necessarily reflective of what might be possible on a property. So for instance, if a large property is zoned RS10, it's just a mathematical equation, and we assume a certain amount for infrastructure, and you take out a factor, and it's based on 100 acres, and it's just a mathematical equation, but you may not be able to actually achieve that many. And so in some cases, those are sort of overstated to some degree just because of the math of it. But we will look at how we will present that information. We will need to be able to address things like traffic or school capacity. And so we will work through how we're sort of calculating those estimates.
Okay, so it's possible under many conditions that information will show up in the staff report as a maximum, just based on the math. Thank you. I think that, we've had people say, if they had more certainty, they would feel better about it. And I appreciate the sponsor's suggestion to do it this way. I feel like the planning analysis also offers that information before it's voted on as well. So I feel comfortable with what y'all will be able to do in that way.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Druffel, you're recognized.
Yeah, I think the intent here is just to create transparency. Let's say a developer comes along and says, I'm going to put in 4 just to get the community support, assuming the community, they are involved. There's a big difference there, and maybe they could do 6 or 8. So I think there's this transparency and certainty, and Councilor Allen just said, if I know that unequivocally there are going to be 4 units on this lot, and you're not going to do 6 or 8, that changes my attitude as a neighbor as to what this looks like. And so for me, this is all about transparency and certainty as we do this, because RNRL really gives you some flexibility to the maximum number per square footage, which I respect, but at the same time, how does someone really know what's going to happen? And we know have a lot of commercial developers that might say one thing to get the information, and then all of a sudden they have the new zoning type, and then they can do what they may to the max. So that's my intent here, is to create that transparency.
Thank you. Councilmember Coopin had his hand up next.
Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you to the sponsor. I appreciate, again, the direction that this is trying to get at on transparency and making sure that communities know what they're getting when a rezoning happens. My hope would be that whoever the district council person over that area is would have some process in place that would address that, right? So a district council person may say, you have to tell me how many units you're going to do, and as part of the engagement, and sometimes that may end up with an SP versus an RNRL district. So I imagine that if a straight rezone versus an SP rezone was desired by an applicant and the council member was supportive, they would have some process to engage and implement that. So again, I think that the idea of transparency is really important and the action of it's important. I think that should come out in the process itself and doesn't need to be kind of recodified here.
Thank you, Councilmember. I share many of the concerns raised by both yourself as well as planning. I think to Councilmember Allen's point, some of the intent behind this amendment is already being accomplished by planning's staff report. And if we were attempted to accomplish those goals as proposed by this amendment, I think it's fraught for a number of reasons. It's, I think, without precedent as we treat other zoning districts. It has legal hurdles. Would it be binding on other subsequent zoning districts if it was rezoned? Where would that, just practical burdens, where would this be recorded? How would it be communicated to people? So I'll be joining some of my colleagues in voting against this amendment. Councilmember Druffel.
Yeah, just a quick note. The staff report is based on the request by the person requesting the project, right? So the staff report is going to base it. They aren't, so assuming they requested 4, staff report would say, yes, it's good for 4, when the reality is it could be more in an RN.
Planning, if you'd like to speak.
And I'll finish at this.
Sure. No, Councilmember, the staff report would be based on, so if someone comes in and says, I would like to rezone property to RN1, they're not requesting a certain number of units. They're requesting a base zoning district, and we would analyze it based on the maximum that's possible for our staff report purposes and for our review purposes. It's the same way if someone comes in and requests RM15 on an acre, we're going to assume 15 units, even if they say, no, we only want to build 10. We always do our analysis for our staff report purposes based on the maximum that's permissible by the district.
Okay, thanks. I just go back to community input. It does change the community's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on amendment number 1? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Will all committee members in favor of amendment 1, please raise your hands, please. I see 0. Will all committee members voting against amendment number 1, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. That is 10 against. Any not voting? Against. Recommend against approval for amendment 1, 0 in favor, 11 against, 0 not voting. Next is amendment number 2, also by Councilmember Druffel. Councilmember Druffel, you're recognized for explanation of the amendment.
Yeah, I think as, again, we increase the density and some of the new zoning types, this just asks for more days notice so that the neighborhood can have a little bit more time to disseminate the information.
Thank you. I saw Councilmember Parker had his hand up. Councilmember Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move the amendment for consideration.
And it's been moved and seconded.
In this one, I feel similarly that, I appreciate what is trying to be accomplished here, but I think if we were to try to implement this, we'd want to do it to every zoning district and not just the RN and RLs. Because, I was sitting here thinking, you could come in and rezone a neighborhood MUN and have 0 meetings. That neighborhood could go all short-term rental, 0 meetings. But here, with all the protections for form and use and everything that we have in the RN and RL, for whatever reason, you'd have to have 2 other meetings. And that just seems like it just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, if we're going to make this change, I think maybe you would want to pursue doing it for every zoning change rather than just these ones here specifically, because there's zoning districts that can be much more intense, that can, transform a residential neighborhood into all short-term rental. I don't see why we would target these zoning districts with requirements for extra meetings, and so I'll be voting against the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought Councilmember Koopman had his hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and sponsor, please assume that I continue to appreciate the work on this and, again, the direction. I feel two different pieces to this. I agree that fundamentally, again, district council member elected by their community should have a process that their community appreciates and believes and supports. And if not, then that person will likely not get voted in again. So I think that's already, the engagement itself is already baked in. I don't personally hate the idea of looking at what the required engagement process is holistically for rezonings. I know we've done that with a couple of other pieces of this. I know the Planning Commission has done that with text amendments. So I think holistically looking at what requirements or not are in rezonings could be a conversation. I don't feel, to my colleague's point, I don't feel that belongs in the code of one specific zoning district, such that other zoning districts wouldn't be subject to that. If that's a standard that the council thinks we should be doing it for all zoning districts or not, but to have it just for one in particular doesn't make much sense to me, so I'll be voting no on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Koopman. Councilmember Gamble, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for not a question, but would like the Planning Commission to talk about, or planning staff to talk about the rules of the Planning Commission that allows for more time for outreach and engagement. I think public engagement is very important. I appreciate the sponsor's intent in this amendment to encourage community meetings, but I agree that we kind of have policies in place, particularly at the Planning Commission stage before it even comes to council, to encourage that. And I just was hoping that you all could speak to that for Title 17 amendments, text amendments.
Go ahead, Planning.
Sure. Yes, for text amendments, the Planning Commission updated their rules of procedure to require two hearings at the Planning Commission. So essentially, if a text amendment comes to the Planning Commission, there's a public hearing. The Planning Commission can then discuss, ask questions of staff. It's then deferred for the equivalent of 2 Planning Commission meetings, which is roughly 1 month. And then it comes back again. And so that way they're allowing time for to hear from the community, to ask questions, to allow staff to make any needed changes or updates or amendments before it comes back to the Planning Commission. So that is sort of specific to text amendments. There's not necessarily, or there's not a requirement at the Planning Commission level for any sort of community meeting related to any rezonings. Yeah, so, but we did try to work in some allowance for engagement on the text amendment process.
Thank you, Planning. I think I saw Councilmember, I saw Druffle's hand was up first, then we'll go to Councilmember Gadd.
Yeah, thanks. And you know, the intention here didn't mean to put it so narrow. That was just R and RL. It was simply to expand the time allowed for people to comment and be aware. I've just talked to Council Lady Gadd, and I think I'm going to withdraw this so that we can come back with a more comprehensive a bill or something that will definitely create more awareness and a better timeline. So at this point, I will withdraw this amendment.
Thank you. I think procedurally, I think we need a committee member. Oh, just one moment procedurally. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gadd, do you still wish to be recognized? Indicated intention to withdraw. Next, we have Amendment 3, also by Councilmember Druffle. Councilmember, would you like to give a brief explanation of Amendment 3, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is really to ensure that as we evaluate future density and zoning changes, that we look at the most recent master plans for stormwater and infrastructure from the multimodal plan, so that it's really, referencing the most recent information we have. And that's really what this is all about.
Thank you for that explanation. Do we have a motion by a committee member to kick off discussion of this amendment? Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Councilmember Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I'm appreciative of the level of review that we have on every, not only zoning change application, but even just a building permit as it relates to these matters. You know, again, like some of the other issues, I don't know that singling out RN and RL for an additional layer of review makes much sense. And if there is a need for additional layers of reviews on zoning change applications, then, I mean, I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And, you know, if that process needs to be examined, I think we look at that process for all zoning districts and not just for these newly created ones. So I'll be voting against.
Thank you, Councilmember. I have had the same thoughts on these, that we're singling out for no discernible reason these unique zoning districts, while at the same time planning has already done a number of studies as to the fiscal impact analysis of different development scenarios, and those fiscal and infrastructure impacts are already well known to this body and the city. I saw Councilmember Coopin also had his hand up. Councilmember Coopin, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Chair. And I would just echo kind of the similar sentiments we've been saying, that these are, I appreciate the intention and direction. I think that, to Councilman Parker's point, if this is something that's beneficial across the board, we should be implementing it across the board, but to single out a zoning district wouldn't make sense to me, so I'll be voting against.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, will all committee members in favor of the amendment please raise your hand? Seeing none, all committee members voting against the amendment, will you please raise your hand? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 against. Any not voting? Councilmember Allen. Committee recommends against approval, 0 in favor, 10 against, 0 not voting. Next, we have Amendment 4 by Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Allen, I'll go to you for a brief explanation and motion on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a kind of a replacement of an amendment that I had that I was told by planning is probably not legal or will make it a disapproved bill, and that was not my intent. But I do want to respond to people that have concerns that we are trying to totally transform neighborhoods. So this is simply an amendment, which I would like to move with a brief explanation. Thank you. That would, it just adds a recital just to say that the intent is to unobtrusively and in compatibility with the existing neighborhood to add additional housing variety. So I hope planning is supportive of that statement, and I would appreciate support just to, again, just further let the public know that our intent is not to wipe out neighborhoods. It's to sensitively provide some housing options in character with what's there.
Thank you, Councilmember. I see Councilmember Coopin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the sponsor for bringing this. And I agree that it's important to share that this is something that's not designed to completely uproot and change the neighborhood. It's designed to complement and supplement it. And you know, this is the recital dance where it's in there, but it's not legally binding, but it's still in there. So I have a little bit of hesitation just on the phrasing, and to me the word unobtrusive jumps out, because I know that you could poll a number of different people, and what might be unobtrusive to me might be very obtrusive to somebody else. And so I worry that that might be creating an unclear expectation with the public. I know I'm sure that's not what the sponsor is trying to do, and I'm sure it's very thoughtfully written. So I'm not sure how I'm going to be voting on this one. I think it's, again, I see what it's getting at, but without it being legally binding, it could introduce more confusion or set different expectations, and it doesn't necessarily codify what we're trying to get at either.
Thank you, Councilmember. I will be voting in favor of this amendment. I think it adds useful context, and that the purpose of this is to provide new housing options, which provide different housing options for people, but are simultaneously being harmonious with the character of the existing neighborhood. And granted that is in some ways subjective, but I think this provides useful purpose into the intent and purpose of the bill, so I'll be voting in favor of it. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate the comments. I'm happy to strike the word unobtrusive if that makes it safer. I think it still communicates the same intent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. All committee members in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Sorry, can you keep your hands up, please? Yeah. Yes, Councilmember Gamble.
Are we voting?
We are voting on it as it is currently introduced with the word unobtrusive in it. So sorry, everyone please keep your hands up. Like 1, 12. Okay. 12 in favor. Any against? Any not voting? Recommend approval, 12 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Next, we are considering amendment number 5, also by Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Allen, you are recognized for a brief explanation and a motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move approval with a brief explanation. This is the amendment that was alluded to earlier that simply delays the effective date of this bill. Rather than being passed immediately upon being signed, it will delay the effective date until April of 2026, which is an amount of time that the planning staff feels would give them time to do the community character explanations that we've talked about earlier.
Thank you for that explanation. I saw Councilmember Parker. You had your hand up. You're recognized.
Thank you. Yeah, so, I'm not opposed to some delay. I guess just as a district council member who has a lot of like evolving policy and kind of in the urban core, there's a lot of cases in our area where folks have requested a base rezoning of like R6 or RM15 or RM20. And, we've been asking them to essentially wait. And, that's been about a year of that. So, I mean, it's not the end of the world to push it out 90 more, 110 more days. But there is, there are areas where like the policy, the CCM doesn't address these new zoning districts, but like they support RM15 today, but we know that we don't really like the outcomes that we get with RM15 today. So, these even without updated policy, it would make sense to utilize these in the shorter term. So I think I'm probably going to have to vote against this because just of my situation in my district and the way that I've been approaching these requests and asking folks to wait. And a lot of folks have been very patient with that guidance. And I'm just not, 120 more days is just, it's just too much for me. So I'm going to probably not be able to support this.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Gamble, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and I would like to speak in support of the amendment. I appreciate the sponsor bringing it forward because it does allow time for the planning staff to update the community character manual and the maps within the community character manual so that people would have a understanding and could be engaged in that process of where the new districts would be applied based in that character manual. So I think this would be a good addition to the bill, and I understand the concern about having to wait a little longer, but I think it would be prudent for our council body to wait until the character manual is updated so that everyone, increase transparency and trust in that this process is being well thought out and well considered in regards to the public. So for those reasons, I support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think I saw Councilmember Benedict and then Coopin.
Thank you, Chair. So if this were on 1007, I'd have a real problem with it because I get a lot of daddy requests. But as it relates to the RN and the RL, this bill, I'm on the fence about it. I lean towards no because, once again, similar to Councilmember Parker, I have had a lot of requests for things and I've told people, hold off. It's, we've got some potential change coming. And so, we need housing and I don't want to slow them down from doing it if they're ready to do it. And housing right now can be expensive to build. We get rezones and then things never get built because it's hard to come up with the money these days. Banks are charging more than ever, or more than a long time. So, I understand the desire to delay this, but I think I'm leaning more towards not supporting this amendment because you hear me talking it through here, thinking it through as I'm doing this because I am struggling with it. But I think I'm I guess it's going to be a rezone. If somebody comes through on, January 20th and says, or in January and files an application for RL in a certain area, it's going to go to the Planning Commission. It's going to come on first, second, and third reading here. And I think as a body, we're going to know at that time, has that council member done what we think they should have done? Or do we wish that they should, delay that bill that they're bringing forward until after April, right? I think that if the council member, and I guess now what I'm getting to is I trust that my colleagues are going to pass and implement this zoning where their community wants it. And if they want it now, then I think they should, be able to do it now. I don't think that we should handcuff them to not be able to do it until after April. I think that as a body, we can, we voted, against, we've talked about a deferral on people's zoning bills if there's opposition to that effect. And so I think that, the more I think about this and talk it through out loud with you guys, I'm not going to be supportive of the amendment. I absolutely get where you're coming from, but I do think that I trust my colleagues to go through the normal rezoning process. And if I have an objection to what they're doing based on information that I've received from the public, then I'll be able to, cover that with that council member here on the floor at that point. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Issa. We'll go next to Councilmember Coopin before going back to Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Question for the planning table. I heard that April 1st was a date that would give you enough time for the community care update. Is there, is that, could it be done a little bit more quickly? Like if this date was March 1st versus April 1st, does that not give you enough time to update it? Just wondering if there's a kind of a compromise here to be had.
Go ahead, planning.
I think that the April 1st will give us adequate time. I think anything less than that would be a bit of a pinch. It gets a little bit more complex around this time of the year. Of course, we'll have to go to the Planning Commission with anything as well. And we're working on sort of outlining our process right now for updating the community character manual, which will likely include conversations with the public. And so we don't want to sort of shortchange any of that process. So we feel like April 1st is enough time, and it will still be tight, but we do feel like it's enough time.
Thank you. Councilmember Coopin.
Thank you for that. And so I am in support of this amendment. I think that I appreciate people and love that there are people chomping at the bit to use these new zoning districts and bring new housing types that are desperately needed in our city. I think that a couple of months delay to do this thoughtfully and intentionally short term may be a little painful for folks that are ready to go. But in the long run, I think we'll let this be implemented in a strategic way that's best for the community. We'll let planning kind of get their ducks in a row with this. And of course, it is kind of holiday season, so that also adds a little bit of that time. So I am supportive of this amendment.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Allen, you had your hand up next.
Thank you. Just another question for the planning staff. Right now, when someone comes to a council member with the rezoning and it goes to the planning commission compares it against the community character manual and says, is this consistent with the policy in the community character manual? And it's spelled out very clearly what zonings are consistent with what policies. And so if there's an interim period that if we do make this effective immediately, what will the planning commission be comparing things with as they try to evaluate things that come up before the community character revisions are done?
We will still,
Please go ahead.
We will still need to update the community character manual. In the interim, I think we would have to put our heads together and look at the text and determine which districts maybe these are most closely aligned with. I think we will do a thorough analysis while at the same time updating the community character manual. Just having the time to update it without having to also be analyzing zone change applications would be helpful. So if it is immediately effective, we will, of course, review and analyze and update the community character manual sort of simultaneously.
Thank you for that explanation. Chair, I think Councilmember Allen's thought that perhaps this adds some difficulty for the Planning Commission if we're needed to, review these against community character manual on an ad hoc basis. But at the same time, I know our district in West is not unique in that we receive a lot of requests for rezoning, and given the current zoning districts that we have, we kind of have to rely on a pinky promise from the developer as to what it's going to look like. Having these new zoning districts as an option could provide greater certainty as to design that's currently lacking from many of our current zoning districts, and I wouldn't want to deny ourselves that option. Of course, the creation of the zoning districts doesn't create any obligation to use them. So having the option of them, I think, is beneficial, even if it requires that the Planning Commission ad hoc review as each one comes up. So I will be voting against this amendment. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. Will all committee members in favor of the amendment please raise your hands? Excellent count. 6 in favor. All voting against the amendment, please raise your hand. I'm voting against it. 6. Any not voting? Seeing none. That is 6 in favor, 6 against, and 0 not voting. Next, we have Amendment 6 by Councilmember Ewing, who is not joining us here today. Councilmember Benedict is signing on. Councilmember Benedict, would you like to make a motion so we can discuss the amendment? Move to approve. I think this amendment, I believe, just adds one word to the ordinance. Are you able to give a brief explanation?
If planning could, that'd be great.
Planning, please go ahead for the explanation.
Sure, this does just, this adds one word, the word design. This is some standard language that is used in other affordable housing incentives and tools, and so this just makes this consistent. So this is really sort of housekeeping.
Thank you, Planning. Councilmember Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. So a while back, I read a really great book that had a lot of photographs of different styles of intergenerational housing that gets built around the country, and you would see very different topologies between the unit that the big family lived in, but then the unit that the grandmother lived in was different. And like, would this preclude, like, when we say design, I mean, do the units all have to have like the same exact square footage and like look the same? Like what, like, are we talking about aesthetics or like form, like, what are we getting at with adding design? And I'm not opposed to it. I'm just like, what is planning's interpretation of what we're constraining here?
Planning, please go ahead.
Sure. I think generally we would expect that finishes and design of interiors be comparable between income restricted versus non-restricted units. We want parity. We want them to be equal in that regard.
Thank you. But it wouldn't, if I may, Chair.
Please go ahead.
It wouldn't preclude, like, on a site having a 3-bedroom unit and then a 2-bedroom unit and also maybe a studio.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, will all committee members in favor of the amendment please raise your hand? See 12. All voting against, please raise your hand. Any not voting? Recommend approval, 12 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Finally, we have amendment number 7 by Councilmember Druffel. I will go again to Councilmember Druffel for a brief explanation, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is just to take a look at how we deliver and what we've done with current zoning changes that we are contemplating right now, and to recognize what the results were before this council ends, so we have a better chance to understand what the success or what we may need to do to make improvements. Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. I saw Councilmember Parker, you had your hand up, you're recognized.
Thank you. I'll move the amendment for consideration.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
All right. Thank you all. So I actually really like this amendment and appreciate Councilmember Druffel for bringing it forward. I think, you know, we can all go kind of look for this data, and I think we're going to be doing so individually, and there'll be third parties that are going to be looking for it. But I think having the opportunity to get kind of a status report from planning. They're going to do a much better job than I'm going to do coming through whatever it is that I'm looking at to try to piece this kind of information together to understand the impact both on housing and infrastructure of these policies. I think it's going to be really useful. So again, I'll be voting in favor of this and appreciate the council member for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Benedict, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favor of this as well. I think it's great. I think, this is going to show us where it's being, this is going to tell us, give us a lot of information to support what we're hopefully going to do this week. So I'm supportive of it. I'm actually going to sign on to it, and I appreciate the sponsor for bringing it forth.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, will every council member in favor of the amendment please raise your hand? I'm also voting in favor. It's 12 in favor, all against. Any not voting. Recommend approval of Amendment 7, 12 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Now we need to vote. Do we have a motion? Can someone renew a motion for approval on the bill overall, please? Moved and seconded. All in the bill as amended. All in favor of the bill as amended? Any against? Any not voting? Vote in favor of the bill as amended. 12 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Next is item 12, BL 2025-1007, sponsors Gamble, Parker, and Benedict, at ordinance amending chapters 17.04, 17.08, 17.12, 17.16, and 17.36 of the Metropolitan Code to amend the regulations pertaining to accessory buildings, detached accessory dwelling units, and detached accessory dwelling unit overlay district. Go first to the legislation sponsor for a brief explanation and a motion, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the substitute.
Moved and seconded. You're recognized for a brief explanation.
Thank you. The substitute adds a parking requirement. We heard from the community concerns about parking issues that the potential DADU may cause. So this substitute adds a parking chapter in the code to the bill, and it requires 1 parking space per dwelling unit, per DADU. With that, move for discussion, I guess.
Thank you. Any discussion on this, on the substitute? Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So would on-street parking count as meeting that requirement?
Oh, sorry. Planning, can you please give a brief explanation?
On-street parking does count as half of a space, and so you can't count a full space. And so if one is required, then it would likely need to be off-site. I would need to look at the precise language, but there is some language allowance for on-street parking, but I believe that it would have to be on-site for this requirement.
Okay.
Thank you. See, Councilmember Coopin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the planning table for that. I would be curious to learn more, and thank you, Councilman Allen, learn more about that. That was my question as well. Makes sense in an area with limited parking to require an additional unit to have a space for a vehicle. But that being said, I think that, I think about the neighborhoods I represent that have ample street parking, and it would likely not make sense on a number of these places, especially if there's no alley access to get to it, and there's, it might be challenging to put a parking space in. And then also we're working on a lot of multimodal goals. If you're in an urban core, for example, with good multimodal access, we may want to incentivize not having a vehicle for a small dwelling unit. So, no particular lean on this. I think just more kind of curious to where this goes. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Coopin. Councilmember Parker, I saw your hand up, and then we'll go to Councilmember Benedict. Or, sorry, Gamble. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So I can certainly see contexts where this may be important, but I'm thinking about like a home where, like an older home that hit the 2.5 foot setbacks on both sides, and you want to do a day-do there, and then maybe it's for an elderly parent who, ideally wouldn't still having to be driving and all that. Like, I guess is there a way to do this that's not across the board? requiring it of every single dado that's built. And I just, because I'm just imagining scenarios where this would cut people out of the ability to do this.
Thank you. I'll go to the planning table for an answer as to that.
Just to clarify, on that regard, specifically, you would also be able to count part of that driveway to the dadu, would also be able to count as a spot if it's long enough, if the dadu is towards the rear of the building and you have that extended driveway. Additionally, this does not require a parking space in the UZO. The UZO standards are still in place where it's like a maximum, not a minimum.
Thank you for that explanation. Councilmember Parker, any further questions?
Just to follow up with that response from planning. So even for 1 and 2 family in the UZO, okay, well, if it doesn't affect the UZO, then I'm fine with it, I guess. Thank you.
Councilmember Gamble, I saw your hand was up.
Thank you, and that was the clarification that I was going to make. So I appreciate planning making that clarification that this does not apply to the UZO, and also to further expand on what Matthew said in the suburban context, for example, there is a lot of land and driveway space to allow for that additional parking space. And that's pretty much where we heard a lot of the concern. And so this is to address that.
Thank you, Councilmember. I myself am going to be voting against this amendment. I think generally property owners and residents know what's best for themselves. If somebody's willing to build or rent a dadu without a parking space and someone's willing to rent it to them from without a parking space, why does the government need to intervene and tell them that they have to provide a parking space they don't want to and they have to have a parking spot that they don't need? So I think this is overly prescriptive, and we'll be voting against a mandatory parking minimum in this instance. Any further discussion by any committee members or otherwise on this amendment? Seeing none, go to vote. All in favor of the substitute on the committee, please raise your hand. Eight. See 8. All voting against? 3. Any not voting? Okay, we recommend approval of the substitute. 8 in favor, 3 against, 0 not voting. Next, we have Amendment 1 by Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Johnson, I will go to, well, first, do we have a motion for the amendment? Moved and seconded. Councilmember Johnson, you are recognized for a brief explanation, please.
Thank you. So when I was talking with planning about this particular bill, my biggest concern was about the size, and that was apparently echoed by multiple council members. And so this bill or amendment reducing the size is the recommendation coming from planning because they wrote it for me. And so it still is scalable. So it starts at 700 if you're less than 10,000 square feet or less. If you're above that, it goes up to 850 square feet. But I just feel like 1,200 square feet, in the instance of my home specifically, if you were to look at my house, and I am on more than 10,000 square feet, if you were to look at my house, I would be able to build a dadu that looks exactly the same as my house from the street. I have a walkout basement that you can't see from the street, but the main living area of my house is 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, living room, kitchen, dining room at 1,200 square feet. So I want to be able to support it because I do think that dadus can be really helpful to people in unique family situations, and also just for rentals, for extra income. I just think it can be helpful, obviously, in many different ways. So I want to support it. But I think if we're going to go that large, that to me is a rezone. If you're going to build a 1,200 square foot house, that's not an accessory dwelling unit. That's just a secondary dwelling unit. And we have tools in the toolbox to rezone to that if that's what you want to do. But I definitely want to maintain the accessory use of these structures.
Thank you for that explanation. We'll go to Councilmember Benedict and then Parker and Coopin. Councilmember Benedict, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm in support of this amendment. I think, when I think about a dadu, I think about it being subordinate to the house, which that's in the law. But at the same time, I think it's important to look at if we want to create affordable housing and truly affordable housing, the smaller the better. I think about, a student needing a place to stay. I think about a young professional needing a place to stay. When I was in that position, I didn't need, 1,200 square feet. My first house was 600 square feet. My apartment before that was 450. So I think that, you know, if we're going to be delivering, or not we deliver, but if we're going to be supportive of delivering that type of a product to the public, if somebody wants to build something like this, I think that this is a more appropriate size. And so I'm actually going to be I'm supportive of this, and I'm planning to sign on to the amendment as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. So I definitely hear the concerns. I will say that there are, other restrictions on bulk and massing, just aside from the living space that's allotted within DADUs. There's language about proportional mass to ensure it's not taller. Roof ridgeline must be less than the primary structure and shall not exceed 27 feet in height. And I also, I understand this perception that, it's students and travel nurses that need housing, but I mean, there's a lot of families that need housing too. And the advantage of 850 or 1,200, I mean, you can have two parents and two kids comfortably in a 1,200 square foot unit. If we want to say no to that, then that's fine. I mean, I'm not really comfortable saying no to that, just knowing the need that there is. And we've seen a lot of this kind of like micro unit development, 350 to 700 square foot in multifamily buildings. That's great for single folks, for dinks maybe, but like, I just know there's a tremendous need for family suitable units, and I'm just not going to be able to support something that would make that less viable. So I'm not going to be able to support this.
Thank you, Councilmember. We'll go to Councilmember Coopin and then back to Johnson before Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And I'm in that same boat where I appreciate and understand where the sponsor is coming from. And I do hear that 1,200 starts to sound like a unit versus an accessory unit. On the lower end, though, I do think that 700 square feet is kind of small for an accessory unit, whereas 850 starts to allow for, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with some living space. So I'm kind of torn on this. I'm leaning towards not supporting it because I do think that providing the option for larger makes sense. And again, to Councilman Parker's discussion that time's up for me, discussion that there's other massing and other spacing requirements there. So I'm gonna lean to not support it, but I want to hear more of the discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that we're talking about a detached accessory dwelling unit. And if you're looking at increasing housing for families where you want to be able to accommodate larger families that are in need, that to me is a rezone to R8, R10, whatever is appropriate. But if we're going to create a DADU, a detached accessory dwelling unit, it needs to be accessory. And I think that a 1,200 square foot unit is no longer accessory. That is a secondary unit on the same parcel. And so that's why I'm reducing the size to stay in character with what an accessory unit is supposed to be. Again, if you want something larger than that, you can rezone. We have tools in the toolbox to rezone to allow for a secondary structure on the parcel.
Thank you, Councilmember. We'll go to Councilmember Allen and then Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the good discussion. And I echo Councilmember Johnston's point about this is one niche that we're trying to fill with this tool, and there are lots of other tools that we're looking at that are in some of these other bills that we're considering. So I think it's important to be responsive to some of the concerns that we heard about expanding where DADUs can go, and I think those concerns are amplified when they are large enough to hold more than a single person. I feel very comfortable saying to people that this can be very low impact. When it's just a single person on a bicycle there, it's a little bit different when it becomes 4 people and possibly all of their cars. So I see the value in keeping this small. I will just say I have another amendment coming up in a minute that discusses some other options on size and also talks about the footprint, which is what the current DADU legislation specifically calls out. Right now, we have a limit of 700 square feet of living space and 750 square feet of footprint on the small lots and 1,000 square feet of footprint on larger lots. And what what was proposed in the original bill and the language that's also used here simply refers to living space. And so the bulk massing limitations are simply that an accessory unit can be up to 50% the size of the house or 2,500 square feet, whichever is larger, whichever is smaller. I think 2,500 is the max. So we're actually talking possibly about 2,500 square feet of structure. And I'm not sure how you enforce how much of this 2,500 square feet is living space and how much is other space. So to me, it's cleaner to speak specifically just about what the square footage of the living space, to keep the square footage of the living space at 700 and to limit the footprint to something that is truly going to be accessory on the size lot. So I will talk further about my bill, my amendment that's coming up that sticks with what we currently have on the books as an alternative. I believe here we could approve both or disapprove both and then figure it out tomorrow as well. So I'm going to vote for this bill because I appreciate the responsiveness to the concerns that we've heard. The two fastest growing demographics have been the aging baby boomers and the and young professionals, and those are not the families that we have concerns about. There are other tools that are being created there. What we desperately need are these smaller units to deal with a small number of people. So I support this amendment, and then look forward to further conversation about some other sizes as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. We'll go to Councilmember Parker and then Gamble.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate again, there's multiple different ways that we restrict the size, the massing. It has to be smaller, proportional to the main structure. There's also other requirements, like we're going to deed restrict these. It's got to be owner occupied. You can't split ownership between the two units. I just disagree with the notion that this is a secondary full unit. There's no HPR here. It's still full ownership of both properties, still required to be owner occupied. And I just what I have a difficult time doing is assuming that in every instance the number of people are going to be maxed out and the number of cars are going to be maxed out. Children don't have cars, they're not allowed. And so I think that we should leave some space for that possibility of families to have access to these units, but we'll see how the debate goes.
Thank you, Councilmember Gamble, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And I would just like to hear from the planning table on this one. I do appreciate the sponsor for bringing this forward. I heard similar concerns. I guess the current DADU overlay, if you could just explain how this is the same or different from the current DADU overlay, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Planning, you're recognized.
Sure. So currently DADUs within overlay or not within overlay, just all DADUs are limited to 700 square feet of living space. Excuse me. So with our original proposal, we had proposed 850 for lots under 10,000 square feet and then up to 1,200 for lots larger than that. We have looked at we've looked at nearby communities, we've looked at other peer cities, and frankly, it's just across the board. There's not really sort of anything consistent where we could say that's the number. So we are supportive of the amendment that would change it to 700 for lots under 10,000 and 850. That still does, as Councilmember Johnston mentioned, allow for some scale for larger lots, but it does keep it within sort of a subordinate size.
Thank you. That's helpful. I'll be supporting the amendment.
Thank you for that explanation, Planning. I saw Councilmember Druffel. I believe your hand was up. You're recognized.
I'll pass. I think I answered.
Councilmember Gadd, did I see your hand up? And then we'll go to Councilmember Cash. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And this is probably for the planning table. With the research that was done to bring the proposals forward, I'm just curious. I know I've had lots and lots of conversations. So thank you all for so much of your time with me on a multi-day basis, probably. I'm curious with some of the research you've done when we're thinking about ADA compliance with the DADU unit. What was some of that information on what space is utilized there when we're thinking? I've had, interestingly enough, someone's reached out. The parent is aging. There's been diagnosis. It will be a disability that that comes forward. So as they're just thinking through the space on when we're thinking about the square footage, I would love if you've got any research or just some guidance there too, as we're looking to minimize the space that's considered for some of these folks who are building units, specifically wanting them, which is the outreach I've had, or for aging parents or specific situations. So I'm just curious if you've got any data on that. And it can, if you don't have it tonight, we can follow up with it, but thank you.
Thank you. Planning, can you give a brief response, please?
Sure. So to be certain that I know what you're asking is, are you asking if we have any research or data on ADA compliance or accessibility issues with DADUs?
And I'm not follow up with that. Just with folks that are using wheelchairs, when you're looking at small spaces, the design changes, and so that square footage gets utilized differently, whether that's in and out of bathrooms, in and out of the home, and so it just came to me recently over the weekend with a specific request for a home that was looking at the DADU specifically for wheelchair accessibility, and so that changes what the footprint access is. And so I didn't know if any of your research, you had some information that would give us some guidance on that.
I don't specific to that, no. I think actual ADA requirements, there is someone in the codes department that does those reviews, but those are only triggered for buildings that have a certain number of units or commercial, and so it probably wouldn't
be triggered for the DADU. The DADU would be using the existing space that we allow. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gadd. Any further discussion on this amendment? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Cash, I forgot. You're recognized.
Yeah, thanks. I am tending to agree with that if we're wanting bigger accessory units that can support a full family, that feels more like it should be an RS to R rezone, especially since we're doing it for the whole USD. But my question is, like, there are, for the planning table, there are, within conservation overlay guidelines, there are guidelines about the size of living, I can't remember if it's footprint or living space, but I think it's living space. So if we're changing what's in the law now, how does that interact with what's in the CZO guidelines?
So anything that I'm so sorry.
Please go ahead.
So anything that this would not modify or change anything that's in the existing historic district guidelines. Those guidelines sit on top of any base zoning standards. And so if the historic district guidelines either are more restrictive or more permissive, they rule. And so there are some allowances right now for DADUs in historic districts where they can have sort of 2 stories or over garages, some things that are within the design guidelines that might be outside of actually sort of base allowances, but the historic district guidelines would control still.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think on my part, I think I agree with Councilmember Parker's concerns on this one. I think to Councilmember Benedict's point, I think it is true that as household size is declining in Nashville, we're building larger and larger units, so largely out of touch with what people need. But at the same time, I think we've catered very well to young millennials with studio 1 and 2 bedroom apartments and failed to provide housing units that can provide, especially sizes appropriate for family formation. And I think I wouldn't want us to preclude that option here for the types of housing that can accommodate family-sized households, especially at a traditionally more affordable price point. So I'll unfortunately be voting against this amendment. Is there any further discussion on this amendment before we vote? Seeing none, will each committee member in favor of the amendment raise your hand, please? 1, 2, 3. Councilmember Benedict, were you looking to vote in favor of this amendment? Yes. 4, 5. All voting against the amendment? Any not voting? Are we done? Thank you. We recommend approval of the amendment 5 in favor, 4 against, 2 not voting. Next, we have Amendment 2 by Councilmember Johnston. First, do we have a motion by a member of the committee? Moved. A second? Councilmember Johnston, I'll go to you for a brief explanation of the amendment, please.
Thank you. In further discussions with planning around this, the problem that they were trying to solve was that currently, in order to be able to build a DADU, you have to be in an overlay. And so your council member has to create, these geographic boundaries. There's alley restrictions or something. I honestly don't know, but it seems very complicated. And that's what they said. It's very complicated. And once you get to the point where you satisfy what the overlay requires, you've got such a massive area that then it tends to be less appropriate for what the council member's trying to do. And so the problem in and of itself was the overlay. So then I said, well, if the problem is the overlay, why don't we just solve the overlay and not make it so difficult and have all these restrictions or requirements to do that, instead of just saying, well, since the overlay is too hard, let's just let everybody in the USD do it. And so, because I just feel like from a policy perspective, if you've identified a problem, solve the problem. Don't necessarily, why are we possibly going to start creating problems in areas that don't want this? If you want to opt in or have an overlay to allow DADUs, your council member can certainly do that, and we can fix. And I think that's what this does, is takes away alley requirements or something. It takes away a lot of the stuff that makes it difficult. And so that's what this is keeping it where you have to create the DADU overlay to allow, just like it is now, but fixing that overlay so that it's not so hard to do, so that areas that really want this can do it, and areas that don't can just leave it as is.
Thank you for that explanation. Any discussion on the amendment? Councilmember Allen, you are recognized.
Thank you. I appreciate solutions, and just want to give a little history on this. When we were first proposing this overlay, there was similar concern to what we're experiencing now, and one of the compromises was to work with neighborhood groups and say, let's create it in a way so that nobody is backing up to somebody who said they wanted a DADU when what the issue was I didn't want one looming over my swimming pool or my child's sandbox or whatever. And so we created it so that everybody who backed up together agreed together, we think this is good for our neighborhood. It was initially proposed to be 20, and the compromise was to go to 30, which I think is a large number. The idea was just to say, if two, and again, this was very much done with the UZO in mind, where the blocks tend to be about 10 houses long. And so 10 houses backing up to each other could all agree, we think this is good. We're not going to impose this on anyone who thinks it's a problem. And so I appreciate the simplification. I just am a little nervous at the number 5. It makes really good sense out in the USD where the lots are much larger, and 30 is a totally inappropriate number. But I think if we were to keep the overlay, 20 is a more meaningful number than 5 is. So I just throw that history out there for the discussion to continue.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go back to Councilmember Johnson briefly before recognizing Councilmember Parker.
Thanks, because I have a question. I didn't write the amendment, planning did for me. So when it said, okay, go to Matt, because where you're saying 5, is that a maximum or is that?
Go ahead, please.
Matt Wilkinson, Council Office. When drafting the bill, or when drafting this amendment, the intent was to make it easier to apply, but also with respect, so we didn't want like one-off, like one lot overlays pop marked everywhere, but to make it as easy as possible. In drafting it, I felt 5 would be generally appropriate, because then you could just say this group of 5 would have it, and then you could move on from there. So that was just a number I sort of pulled out because I thought it was appropriate.
Okay, so just for clarification, so let's say I have a larger area that wants this overlay.
You could go higher.
You could go higher than 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a minimum.
So 5 is a minimum. Gotcha. Is that better, Berkeley? Okay.
Thank you. I'll go next to Councilmember Parker. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. So as I'm reading this, this would impact the areas outside of the USD. This is like a GSD and how it interacts with the overlay.
Councilmember Johnson, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just talking. So the GSD is still an overlay that you have to opt in. The USD, it's what I'm saying is the USD needs to be opt-in too.
Oh, yeah. Okay. If I could get planning's explanation of what this amendment does as it relates to the bill as it is before us, please.
Sure. So currently in the code, there's a couple of different ways that DADUs are allowed. DADUs are allowed within R districts if there are certain standards that are met for those R districts, such as there being an alley, it being within the USD or in a historic district, UZO or a historic district. So right now you can, if you're in an R district and you meet a bunch of standards, then you're permitted to have a DADU. The other way that DADUs are permitted is within the USD if you get a DADU overlay. So those are sort of the two ways that they're permitted right now. This would change it to say that the only way that a DADU is permitted is within a DADU overlay. So it's actually taking right now where there are entitlements within the UZO for our districts, they would lose the ability to do DADUs unless an overlay comes back.
Thank you.
Not my intention.
Intention to withdraw. I guess that precludes the need for
Okay.
further discussion. Okay. Next, we have amendment number 3 by Councilmember Druffel. Before we go to an explanation, do we have a motion for approval by the committee member? Do we have a second? Councilmember Druffel, you're recognized for a brief explanation, please.
Yeah, this does the same thing, just brings us back and to take a quick look at our success or where we went very similar to 1005.
Thank you for that. I'll go first to Councilmember Benedict and then Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Chair. So just like in the prior bill we looked at, this one I think is good. I think this is going to give us the, information of what's going on and, how it's going to help us measure what's happening here. So I think that, again, this is one I'm planning to sign on to and I'm in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Parker, you're recognized.
Same here. I think benchmarks are helpful, and I appreciate the council member for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? Any against? Any not voting? Recommend approval, 11 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Next, we have Amendment 4 by Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Allen, I'll go to you for a motion and a brief explanation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move for approval with the brief explanation. And here's the explanation. This is very similar to the bill that we talked about a couple amendments back that would bring the size of the living space back down similar to where it is now. The major differences are it simply reverts to the current requirements, which is 700 square feet of living space regardless, and then 750 square feet of footprint in the smaller lots and 1,000 square feet of footprint on the larger ones. And I will say I was talking to some architects and some builders today just about, what is possible and what is just within construction requirements and other constraints like that. And I would say there's still a little bit more discussion that could be had on this, and I will continue to do that. But this is keeping us where DADUs are currently today, and it's very specific about the footprint, whereas the current bill that's before us, as well as the amendment, speak only to the living space and not to the footprint. And again, I will just say, right now, the constraints on footprint are simply 50% of the main unit or 2,500 square feet, which can be impactful on larger lots. So I prefer the more specificity on the living space and the footprint requirements. And again, I think this is important for addressing the concern that we've heard is how do you know these will actually be affordable? And I think keeping them small is what keeps them affordable. So I would appreciate support for this just in terms of discussion. I hope we can continue to work out whether the 700 and 850 is a good combination or just keeping it at 750 as we currently have it and seems to have been working. So I would ask for approval on this.
Thank you, council member. Any discussion on this amendment?
And I have a late file.
Councilmember Campbell, I'll go to you first, and then Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I just need a little bit more clarification. So the current bill, I guess an explanation from the planning table on how the current bill addresses footprint or if it addresses footprint.
Planning, recognized for explanation.
Sure. So there are different types of accessory buildings, and there are size restrictions for general accessory buildings, but those under the proposal do not apply to detached accessory dwelling units, which would be the 2,500 square feet. So for regulations relating to detached accessory dwelling unit, what is now proposed, or the bill as amended, would be, as substituted and amended, would be 700 square feet for under 10,000 of living space, 850. There is not a footprint written into specifically for DADUs. They still have to be no larger than the house, but we wanted to allow flexibility for there to be a garage attached, for instance. And if you had a footprint maximum of 750, that would not allow for a 700 square foot living space plus a garage. If you had, unless it was stacked, which doesn't always work, and if you have a larger lot, you may want to have a garage next to a DADU, but it be in the same structure. Or to allow for things like a porch on a DADU, you can see that sometimes, or for there to be a workshop or something attached. And so we sort of intentionally didn't limit the footprint, understanding that those could have other sort of uses attached, but it would still be governed by being limited by the size of the house.
One final question. How has the DADU, and hopefully you can answer this, DADUs that have been constructed or applied for up until this point, we've had the DADU overlay for a couple of years now. Have you seen any situations where where this footprint has become an issue, or where you see a lot of DADUs where they want to put a garage or they want to add a porch, or just some context on what has been happening, transpiring?
Well, I think most DADUs that we have seen have been actually built within historic districts, and within historic districts, because they're governed by the guidelines, they generally may actually have a little bit more flexibility than sort of what's written into the code right now. And so they may not be running up against these problems because most of what we see are within the historic districts now. But we did want to just allow for sort of that flexibility.
Thank you for that explanation. Councilmember Parker, was your hand up next?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I have similar thoughts that I won't rehash here, but specifically on the question of 700 versus 750 footprint. Yeah, I mean, like that, the delta there of 50 square feet, that's not enough to park a car in. I mean, I think you would need bare minimum 200 square foot to park a car in. That's a small car too. And so, you know, I think for the reasons that I was not in support of the previous one, I'm not in support of this, but you know, if we are going to adopt this footprint versus living space standard, would like it to be a little more flexible than what's proposed here, just to allow people, what we do see, like we have an SP in Cleveland Park that has led to a lot of datas being constructed. It's got its own specific, that was before any data overlay existed, so it has its own specific characteristics. And what we see is a lot of a garage, the full size of the footprint, and then stairs up to the living space above. And that's great for folks that can walk up and down stairs 3, 4, 6, 8, 10 times a day. But I just want to make sure that we're able to build units that will accommodate people who, are not able to do that or just don't want to do that for whatever reason. So, I won't be supporting this one, but I do think that there's some merit to revisiting this conversation at some point, but I just want to make sure we leave the flexibility there for folks to be able to add parking if they want, or workshop, or like as planning was saying.
Thank you. I'll go to Councilmember Allen, then Councilmember Gadd.
Thank you. I appreciate the good discussion here. And again, I was speaking with the builder this afternoon who mentioned, a two-car garage is typically 24 by 24, which is 564 square feet. So you can do that and have a stairway and go up to the second floor. But you're right, in terms of accessibility, that does involve stairs. But the footprint for a two-story, again, 700 square feet gives you much larger than a two-car garage. So that's an option there. So I will say that in having this discussion with this, I do believe that perhaps the exact dimensions are something that we could learn a lot from, maybe in 2 weeks. Maybe it may take longer than that, from the people that are actually building them. And I appreciate the fact that the planning staff has looked at what other cities have done. I think there's some great resources here in Nashville that we might be able to get some great information from, just in terms of reality checks of what can be done. I learned a lot this afternoon just in talking to one on that one. So I think that there are plenty of good examples that do provide both some parking in a stacked option with the 750 and the 700 living space square footage. And certainly on the larger lots, when you've got the 1,000 square foot, then that gives you the ability to put it beside it. So there is the option on the larger lots. I will mention I have a late filed amendment late filed change to this amendment that would specifically say that the height of the eaves is measured at average grade. And that was another interesting conversation I had this afternoon, speaking with the builder, who said it made much more sense from a building standpoint to measure from grade. So to me, that's kind of a little bit more of an unfinished question there as well. So I will ask to discuss my late filed amendment, which simply adds the words height as measured from average grade, which is what the planning staff supports, so that that's consistent with all the other options that we're looking at. If I can do that, I think it's a late filed amendment that has been written down. And do we need to vote?
Yeah, we'll get to the late filed one.
We'll get to the late filed piece as well. And this part may be the more relevant discussion anyway. I just wanted to let people know that part was out there as well. So again, in trying to address concerns about impact on existing neighbors, I think being small is relevant, and in trying to address the concerns of that, well, these may not be inexpensive anyway, smaller is less expensive. So for that reason, I think this is an option that I would like for us to have on the table at least till tomorrow night to discuss with the full body. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gadd, I'll recognize you next.
Thank you so much. And I think I wanted to just mention, I really appreciate the sponsor making sure we're exploring this option as well. I think it's one right now, just the way it would apply when we're thinking through on what we just approved, or what amendment we just approved, which would be the inclusion of parking spaces outside the UZO. I just think, to me, this has a whole lot of just potentials I may not be able to support right now, but I do appreciate the sponsor bringing this up as part of the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. Will all committee members in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 2 in favor. Will all committee members against the amendment, please raise your hand. Any not voting? We recommend against approval, 2 in favor, 7 against, 0 not voting. Next, we have a late filed amendment by Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Allen, I'll go back to you for a motion and brief explanation, please.
If I withdraw this, we can't talk about it tomorrow night, right?
I ask Ms. Darby to speak to that one moment.
You would still be able to move
Okay.
the amendment on the floor tomorrow
On the floor.
night.
Well, I'll go ahead and move this and we can vote for it really quickly. This is exactly the same as what we just voted down, so that's fine. Except that it uses the height measurement starting point of average grade, which is what planning supported. So I'll just throw it out there one more time and ask for approval.
Thank you. Any discussion on this late filed amendment? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. Will all committee members in favor of this amendment please raise your hand? See two. Will all committee members against the amendment, voting against the amendment, please raise your hand? Any not voting? Seeing none. Recommend against approval, 2 in favor, 8 against, 0 not voting. Next, we have a late filed amendment by Councilmember Gadd. Councilmember Gadd, I'll go to you for a motion and brief explanation, please.
Yes, I'd like to move my late file amendment. I realize I could make my own motion. For purpose of discussion here, this amendment, the way it's drafted, it took me a moment to really understand it, but we do have the planning table who can answer those questions, but essentially would delay the implementation of the DADU legislation to currently, to historically zoned properties or historic overlays that don't already have an overlay, a DADU overlay. So the date, the November 1st, it's my understanding, the planning table, Matt, picked that date specifically, or just to allow all the rights that currently exist at that time to continue to exist, unless you're in this. And so if this amendment, along with the proposal was approved, it would delay the implementation by 1 year of the DADU into the historically overlaid districts. And the reason for that was to give some time to kick off to formally kick off the preservation plan that's being considered or revisited by the planning department and the historic zoning team. And because some of that will extend not just in the Midtown West, but into some of my districts. So it would give an opportunity to see if any of the properties there are going to qualify for that preservation plan when we're thinking about design.
Thank you for that explanation. Any discussion on this? I see Councilmember Coupon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies on a very specific question that I did not have time to check since this was late filed, which is fine. So I have historic Germantown in my district. So for historic Germantown, would this not allow for the new DADU overlay because it already has it or does not have it? What would this amendment do to this bill for Germantown?
I'm Matt Wilkinson, Council Office. Essentially, what this bill does is sort of put in amber for a year or until January 1st, 2027, the DADU regulations. So if the historic overlay already allows for DADUs, that's not going to change. It's just saying all the DADU regulations that are in place as of November 1st, 2025, which are the current ones, will just continue to be in place for historic districts until January 1st, 2027 when it expires, or if you guys decide you need more time, you extend it by resolution or reauthorize it.
Thank you. Thank you. I saw Gamble and Allen's hands went up at the same time. I'll go first to Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question to follow up on that. So does that mean that if the historic district does not have an overlay, then they also will not be able to participate in the DADU overlay until 2027?
That is correct, unless it's eligible to apply the current version of the DADU overlay, which no, I don't think a council member would do, considering that it would expire within a year. They'd go to the new standard.
Okay, that concerns me because that then would mean that the DADU, if we pass this DADU allowance, then historic districts who don't already have a DADU overlay would not be able to participate or not be able to be allowed to build a DADU. That's basically what that, yes.
Yeah, and under, unless they're currently allowed to do so under existing entitlements. Until it expires in
Until it
January 1st,
expires.
2027.
Until 2027. Yeah, for that reason, I would not be able to support the amendment. I appreciate the intent by the sponsor, but I understand the intent in wanting to get that preservation report, which I think is important. But then it would delay any options for people who may need the DADU option for a whole year. And that preservation report might not impact them. So for that reason, I can't support this, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gamble. I'll go to first to Councilmember Allen and then Cash.
I think that was my same question, is if I have areas in a historic overlay or conservation overlay and they're currently zoned RS, and we pass this with this amendment, then they would have to wait a year before they could do it.
They would continue to maintain their existing entitlement. So if they're not currently allowed to do so, they would not be able to do so until this expired.
But the non-historic people across the street
Yes.
would. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Cash, you are recognized.
Thanks. I think this is a little much and concerns me. I don't think I will support it tomorrow. But I want to ask this. So just to be clear, outbuilding, this is not about outbuilding. The outbuildings could still be built, right? But I guess
this doesn't impact construction of outbuildings. That would still go through the normal process with the historic overlay, so it would go through the review process. This only impacts the use of the DADU use within the historic overlay area.
right. Could it still be like built inside with the floor plan and stuff, and just not get the DADU permit, or?
I would defer to Margaret on that question. Because it gets into a point where, theoretically, you could build the accessory structure and just unfinish it and then come back for a later permit to finish the interior.
Gotcha.
But it gets into some sticky questions with how codes interprets it, how codes administrator Hargis interprets the code and what he issues permits for.
Right. I kind of think this is, I get the intent, but I think it's kind of complicated. And thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, we will go to the vote. Will all committee members in favor of this amendment by Councilmember Gabb, please raise your hand. I see one. Will all committee members voting against this amendment, please raise your hand. Any not voting? Recommend against approval, 1 in favor, 9 against, 0 not voting. There are no reports from the chair, and with that, we're adjourned. Oh, wait, sorry. Oh, sorry, wait, we need one final motion. Do we have a motion on the bill as substituted and amended, please? Moved. All in favor? Any opposed? Any not voting? Recommend approval as substituted and amended, 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. And we're adjourned. As long.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.